Hello, everybody. My name is Michel Besner from Prevu3D, and I want to welcome Alex Doukas from Kinetic Vision on this exciting webinar we're doing today. Hey, Alex.
Hey, how's it going, Michelle?
It's doing great, doing great. It's just came back from a pretty exciting trade show last week. I was in Germany for Hannover Messe, and there's definitely a lot of excitement with our latest release of RealityPlan, the RealityAsset, and a lot of good stuff happening. So it was a great proof to the pudding that we're doing a lot of the right things. And again, today, I think we'll show to our attendees some of the great work we're doing with you guys. I know we were doing a show as well together at the NVIDIA GTC conference a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of trade shows, but it's good to be in contact with our customers and everything.
Yeah, likewise.
Before we start anything else, anyone attending this presentation, feel free to ask questions. We want this to be a very dynamic environment. Ask away. There's no hard questions. We want everything. We want to talk about all the way down to the down and greedy of things. And I think we have great content with the work that Kinetic Vision is doing that I think some people will be surprised of what they have been working on and what they can deliver for customers in manufacturing and other industries. So I guess we'll start, Alex. Maybe you want to do a quick intro of Kinetic Vision and the history of it quickly and what you do and all the nice stuff. And I think you have a great storyline about how you deal with the digitization process as well. That's really important.
Yeah, of course. So we're a development and technology firm that was actually incorporated back in 1988. So by no means we're not a startup. We've been around for over 30 years now. And we started in, we'll call it the digital twin space. We really made digital twins cool from the get-go. We were working in the structural analysis world back in the 80s. Anything from small scale consumer package testing. So think of virtual drop testing, compression testing, load testing, all the way to large scale industrial equipment testing. So think like the likes of Caterpillar and other industrial equipment. We serve a couple different key vertical markets: CPG, medtech, and food and beverage are I would say three main pillars. Really focused on rapid innovation, and we have a tremendous diversity of skill sets here at Kinetic Vision to really help support that. So I already mentioned structural analysis on the finite element analysis side of things. We have a group dedicated to design and engineering, a group dedicated to industrial design, one dedicated to metrology, software development, virtual reality. You can tell with that trend, the list goes on, a very diverse list of different capabilities under one roof. And that's really something we like to promote. We're an end-to-end service provider. So a customer comes to us with a problem statement, and we work with them to go ahead and either develop a plan that we can help support, or we have vendors, amazing vendors like Prevu3D that we can utilize as needed. So, from that perspective, my background actually started on a more technical track. So I worked in the non-destructive testing space, in metrology for about, roughly 8-9 years. So I worked primarily with industrial CT. So if you're not familiar, very similar to medical CT or medical MRI. So things scanning down to the micron level. So you're able to go ahead and indicate, porosity in mouse femurs, for instance. That's really the world that I lived in for quite a bit of time. And then in the last 5 years or so, I think I would say COVID really accelerated the need for digital representations of anything from large scale facilities to smaller scale pilot plants, to go ahead and have accurate representations of spaces. So my mindset somewhat shifted from, we'll call it micro scale analysis, to macro scale analysis.
Yeah.
And what's really neat about our capabilities is that we really have the ability to do either or both, just dependent upon the need. So yeah, my background is mostly in the non-destructive testing space. I also have enough, information and expertise across all of our different disciplines to at least be dangerous. But yeah, I go ahead and connect, our customers to the right technologies to ensure their project's successful. So that's a little bit about me and about the company.
That's great, and I really love your how you're defining the process. Like, you have this acquire, activate, optimize, and maybe you want to talk a bit more about that because I think it's really a great way of explaining the process that you've been successful in at Kinetic Vision.
Yeah, and I actually have a video that I'll play here that helps
Cool.
really paint the story, and hopefully that gets put on here. Is that being projected, Michelle?
Let me see here. I think there we go. Now we have
There we
it.
go. Okay, perfect. So we actually presented this video at GTC. So like Michelle mentioned earlier, we did a collaboration booth at NVIDIA's GTC. I actually personally got to meet Jensen Huang, which is amazing. And we utilized a Navis scanner, a VLX3 that we have at Kinetic Vision to go ahead and digitize our upstairs manufacturing space. So we have essentially a physical replicate of a conveyance line that we wanted to go ahead and better understand. And I'm actually going to pause. That we wanted to go ahead and basically replicate a digital environment within the space. And the first place you start is with data acquisition. So
Hmm.
we support a variety of different acquisition modalities. Like I was mentioning, I think one of the most important parts of Kinetic Vision is that we really we use the right tool for the job. That can be
Yeah.
either hardware or software. And when it comes down to hardware, I think understanding the problem statement is so important. So understanding any accuracy requirements, understanding what level of fidelity is needed, understanding different levels of transparency or complexity to different pieces of
Mhm.
equipment or macro level environments that you're trying to capture. We utilize terrestrial scanners. Like I mentioned, we use our VLX3, which is a SLAM-based LiDAR capturing
Mhm.
system. We use photogrammetry, Gaussian splat, which is a newer technology that's really interesting. It's
Mhm.
almost like an interpolation of photogrammetry, but really, again, using the right tool for the job. In this instance, we are using our VLX3 to go ahead and capture our upstairs space. And then
Yeah.
from there, we utilize, and I'll play the video again here, we're utilizing Prevu3D to go ahead and actually activate the data. So if we're able to go ahead and
Yeah.
show, yep, thank
Yeah.
you.
There you go.
Um, we utilize Prevu3D really to activate the data. So when I say activate, that can mean a few different things. So that can be anything from reconfiguration of different components, like you see on the screen here, to measuring, to sub-segmenting different things, to actually creating assets, and
Mhm.
also annotations of different segments. This really just helps enable an immersive experience where anybody from VP level to boots on the ground can really interactively engage with it. And then we
Mhm.
get on to the next stage where we focus really on optimization. So, I mentioned COVID earlier. I think one of the biggest highlights that we noticed industry shift to is an industry shift or mentality shift from research and development to more of a shift focused on, I would say production optimization. And so focusing to production optimization and R&D can help facilitate that production optimization. We utilize tools like Omniverse, Unreal, Unity, to go ahead and create essentially, we'll call it digitized representations of those different environments. So then you're able to go ahead and actually activate them, optimize throughput, optimize how you're actually going to engage with that equipment, and then take it even a step further to go ahead and do things like closed loop integration, closed loop PLC control, where you're using maybe AI or machine learning. You're using all the sensor infeeds from the data sources, from your lines, and then you're basically creating we'll call it like a centralized database to go ahead and make decision making for you. So then you're not having to go ahead and actually tweak the dials based on need. You're essentially allowing the system to go ahead and act on its own on a
Yeah.
more of a more autonomy, and that really that level of autonomy or that level of integration really empowers production cells to not rely as heavily on their individuals, and it can make for a more efficient workflow. So
Yeah, E- exactly. And what I love about what you were describing is that there's obviously a notion of choice and options and how things can be done. And the word that comes for me is the notion of a trusted advisor, right? Like I
yep,
think that companies that want to digitize their facilities, there's not like a single way of doing it, depending on the size, the complexity, the type of equipment you have, the type of use cases you want to address. And I think that that's definitely something that I appreciate. What your company is doing is to really have this more like, this toolkit and these sets of different technologies and tools that, depending what you're trying to do, will be adapted. And I think that's very important, because I feel that we talk a lot about digital twin, but we often forget about talking about the maturity stage of a company, right? And we assume that everybody is at the same stage. And I like the example of when you talk about like a CRM, like a customer relationship management system. Like right now, it's obvious that most companies have a CRM because that's what you need to have. But 20 years ago, it was still an optional thing. Like it was very expensive if you wanted like a ACP type of solution. And
Right.
before companies like Salesforce.com came out with more accessible CRMs, it now becomes basically commoditized, right? People now like, yeah, you have a CRM. There's some that are very affordable, and it's not a question anymore. I think the digital twin isn't the same type of maturity curve, and some companies are more advanced, and even big names are still very early. And I would like to get your input about, what's your experience with that? Because I'm guessing that sometimes you're talking to some of these companies, and yeah, we see the big names, we assume that they are all mature about this, and they're still very much at the discovery stage.
Yeah, yeah. So we see really all walks of life, so to speak, all the way from they're just starting their digital twin journey. They're starting to get educated. We really become that educator for them, where we're talking through all the different options that we have at our disposal to help fulfill some of their goals. All the way to some of these companies where they'll have 500 warehouses digitized. They'll have all of their assets that they represent in a store. I recently talked to a very large retail vendor where they had, over 10,000 assets digitized. So then they can make essentially replications of their physical products in a digitized space for their consumer. So there's really a wide range, and it doesn't have to be small company versus large company.
Yep.
It can be honestly Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 50 companies coming to us that we help support, really starting that journey. So if you feel like, if let's say you are one of those folks in the Fortune 500 and you feel like you're being left behind by industry, you're not,
Mhm.
because you really have partners like myself and Michel to go ahead and help get you up to speed quickly. That's really what we do. We help educate. That's really one of the biggest things that we help promote: education, and then also obviously using that right tool for the job. So from that perspective, just talking through the workflow as a whole. Generally, what we recommend, when a customer comes to us with like a problem statement, or maybe they don't even have a problem statement, and they're like, "Hey, we think we could use digital twins for XYZ way." That's where we start to really digest where the needs lie. Any requirements that obviously lie out there. We generally recommend starting with a proof of concept deployment. So really
Yep.
small scale opportunity that both parties believe can be really attainable. Think really small scale down to like the conveyance line that I was sharing with you earlier. Starting with something that small scale, so then you really dip your toes, so to speak, in the water before having ambitions to go ahead and basically digitize 1.5 million square feet, and then have
Yeah.
the entire manufacturing floor automated, and AI running your entire manufacturing floor. That's an amazing aspiration, but you have
Yeah.
to start somewhere, and that's the thing I oftentimes have to ground customers on, is we have to start somewhere, and this is a really great place to start. And let's learn quickly, let's fail quickly if we do need to fail, and let's learn from those, and let's expand our capabilities.
Absolutely. And I also find that when the customer has its own data, like it's a part of their facility that you've scanned, right? So it's not just like a demo data set that was crafted and who knows how it was fine-tuned to look great. You're really dealing with the actual customer data. I think
Yeah.
it helps a lot on, again, back to this digital twin journey about, if you want a digital twin for many use cases, and some of them are engineering driven use cases, but there's others, like we see some of our customers wanting to do their health and safety documentation, and or like HR onboarding of new employees and other things like that. And obviously that requires a wider stakeholder onboarding from the company. So getting more C-level people on board on doing this type of investment, and having a POC where you show, here, that's one part of your facility, here's what's possible, and really engage that conversation definitely helps to accelerate the process. And so I think that anybody listening to this webinar or talking to our companies, it's the important thing is to get started on the journey as soon as possible. And that journey can take years to get where you want to go, but you need to start somewhere. Otherwise, you're just at the starting line and just wondering about should you do something.
That's exactly right. That's very well said. Yep, yep. And then there's opportunity, obviously, to expand that. I was talking a little bit about different ways to optimize. You can get really, you can get into really interesting use cases where you're implementing, sensor data, you're implementing PLC control, or you're implementing, PLC throughput data, vision system data, a number of different sensor inputs that then enables you to go ahead and actually make, we'll call it like reactive decisions. So there's one way of looking at it. The first step would be likely creating a deployment in which it's used as, like, we'll call it a digital shadow, and that's a term used in industry more for like operator guidance, to help lead you to a position in which you can make a decision. The second stage would really be autonomy. You have all these different data inputs. How do we go ahead and utilize all of these and potentially some, leverage of artificial intelligence or machine learning, to go ahead and digest all these inputs, all these sensor inputs, and then go ahead and actually output the actual system running not only in the digital realm, but actually feed that into the actual physical control of the system. And that's really where industry is going. And a number of different outlets are helping to support that. I know, NVIDIA's Omniverse is really a trailblazer in that respect. They're helping link together, roughly 20 programs or more within their Nucleus platform to go ahead and essentially aggregate all these different data inputs. And then you're able to see a nice visualization of that digital twin, and then obviously get to interact and, hopefully downstream control it. So.
Absolutely. There's a lot of details as you're describing, and I'm curious if there's anybody attending this webinar, if you have any questions, right? Because we're here to, we want to talk about things, but we want to explain and educate anybody that has questions or curious about the process that Kinetic Vision has with their customers. So anybody has a question online, we're definitely open to answer any of your questions. So as we're waiting for any questions, can you have anything like you can show us like a bit more like on how you're using Preview and some of these capabilities and how you're
Of course. Yeah, so I actually have that data set up that we're looking at previously. So this is our manufacturing space. Disregard some of the clutter. We actually use this as multi-purpose space. Storage is one of those use cases. But this is actually an area in which we use a physical conveyance line to actually validate some of the actual physical accelerometry data that we're utilizing in the finite element space. We're actually utilizing this with some drones that we've developed to go ahead and understand essentially throughput of bottles and the different forces and fatigue that they experience going down a conveyance line. And why is this important, and how does this relate to Prevu3D? Well, Prevu3D really helps enable this workflow. So without Prevu3D, I'm not able to go ahead and actually segment out the assets and utilize those assets for input into actually creation of those different, digital twin representations. So if I go ahead and zoom into the actual scene here, you'll be able to see that conveyance line that we were looking at previously. You'll also see like an ISBM system here that we work with in coordination with our line. But if let's say we wanted to go ahead and utilize this data to go ahead and actually recreate this asset or reconfigure the asset, or simply just segment it out and utilize the segmented asset, there's a couple different ways that we've used Prevu3D to go ahead and skin that cat. I've been really using the Asset Magic Wand lately to go ahead and really work through some more complex segmentation operations. So I'll go ahead and let's see here. I don't want that. There we go. There we go. So I'll utilize this to go ahead and select the different surfaces, and it's been a really nice tool to go ahead and help visualize the actual segmented surface that I'm about to go ahead and extract for digital twin development.
Very quick.
It is very quick, yeah, it is. And then you can go ahead and start to define, the different components that you want included. And then I can go ahead and rotate it so then I can see what's being included down here. And again,
And I think it's a great example because it's, assets in the manufacturing sites are complex in shape, right? And so I think there's a lot of solutions out there that have a single rectangle to define the asset, and you're able to define a much more complex environment with just a few clicks.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. We've likely captured a majority of it at this point, which is great. So then you have that defined as an asset, and you can go ahead and even redefine the bounding box should you want to.
Yep.
So I can go ahead and rotate this. And just like you said, this just allows a lot more flexibility. You can also do this with the box methodology or even the cut methodology. But this is a great way to go ahead and actually have the asset recognized as an asset, and then utilize this. So then let's say someone is trying to go ahead and understand where this conveyance line is among a 1.5 million square foot facility. They would have the ability to go ahead and obviously search based on obviously the name, but then that's where we can go ahead and add different things like different properties. We can add different components. We can say line speed. Then we can say, let's do 10.
It's a great example you're showing because one of our ideas exactly that is to allow any form of parameterization to be possible, right? There's so many things you want to document, and it could be linked to specific performance criteria on that specific conveyance belt to other information. We're seeing a lot of people showing interest for doing asset inspection planning. Like if you want to start tagging some of your piping and say, well, what are the areas of the piping that I need scaffolding to inspect those specific piping, other things like that. So there's a lot of ways to start attaching parameters to those assets and then making this like a fully searchable experience, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's how we have folks engaging with that as well. And then if let's say you want to actually cut it out, or if let's say you want to go ahead, I'll delete this for now. If let's say you want to go ahead and maybe go with a more traditional box-based reality capture, this is also a really easy way for us to go ahead and come in here. And if I go over here, I can go ahead and redefine. Starting with the floor. Go ahead and bear with me.
It's always nerve-wracking to do a live demonstration during a webinar.
Yeah, I know. There we go. There we are. Okay, perfect. And I actually don't want to capture the floor.
Yeah.
And then if I want to
just it out, yeah, there you go.
If I just want to capture a section of it, so then if I want to go ahead and actually extrapolate this out, I can go ahead and generate that asset. I can say conveyance line segment. Okay. And then that's where you can go ahead and duplicate this.
Yep.
So if, let's say you want to go ahead and add on to that, if you wanted to go ahead and make a few additional subsegments of the line, that's where we're having customers really use this from a configuration perspective. There we go.
This is great. Anybody has questions? Don't be shy. I know that no question is a stupid question. It's like it's for us to help us. You understand how we can help you with this type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
So
I
yeah,
think it's great that you're showing here because it's one of the values of our product. It's very fluid and interactive. Like it's almost like playing a game in the manufacturing space, right? You're able to move, edit space, and it's not like cumbersome as other traditional 3D tools have been in the past. It's really making it easier to change things.
that's right. Yeah. And that's the thing that really resonates with a lot of the customers we help serve. Usability is a big factor. You want a boots on the ground individual to be able to go ahead and interact with this for anything from like a warehouse reconfiguration all the way to maybe a VP of operations where they want to go ahead and understand, hey, if I go ahead and buy let's say another $20 million of capital equipment, and I want to verify that we can go ahead and get these new pieces of equipment into the space accurately and safely. It's a great way for all walks of life, essentially, to go ahead and utilize the data from that perspective.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's really helpful.
And also, as you mentioned it, like I think that a lot of companies are not yet realizing how many use cases you can cover with such a digital twin, right? Obviously, right now we're very much in the engineering, area where we're designing the space, changing the layout of the facility. But once you're deploying this type of digital twin, there's so many things you can think about doing this. Like I said before, like you could start documenting health and safety hazard, or instruction manuals, or link your learning management system, or link your other systems that you might have into the enterprise that you want to make it all accessible within this environment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So then, actually, once we go ahead and capture those different data sources, we utilize that as reference. So I showed you isolating out, the conveyance
Mhm.
line that we have upstairs. This is actually bringing it into. We've done this within Unreal. We've done this within also Omniverse. This is a representation of that line, of multiple different conveyance tracks working in unison. You're able to come in here and actively change different parameters to go ahead and understand how that's going to go ahead and correlate, to potentially, bottles tipping over, or maybe you're looking into accumulation. This helps you validate that prior to you ever actually deploying maybe a new bottle type, or maybe a certain amount of liquid being in this bottle, or maybe you're looking just to go ahead and optimize throughput. This allows you to do those what if trials, which is really nice. We can also do things like virtual machine vision deployment, which is really neat.
Yep.
So if you guys are familiar with like, Keon's, Cognex, Matrox, we work with all the biggest vendors to go ahead and better understand, and you can actually see some of that accumulation down here. We work with some of the biggest vendors to go ahead and actually do, we'll call it pre-manufacturing floor deployments, where we're utilizing essentially synthetically developed fields of view to go ahead and understand, hey, is this going to be the right camera for this application? Is this the
Yep.
right spot in space for me to go ahead and, let's say, count bottles? So if I deploy a camera right here and I want to go ahead and capture, let's say 5 feet of data, do I have the right megapixel camera, for instance, for that deployment? And then also on top of that, we can also utilize these assets that are being created to
Mhm.
go ahead and actually create synthetically generated defects or anomalies. So then if, let's say, you want to indicate like a tip over, and when that bottle is tipped over, indicate to the camera system that you have a failure, you can essentially pre-train that model prior to it ever being deployed in the actual production facility, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
that's
So
great.
it doesn't take days or months of training. It takes literally all the days prior to you actually going to deployment, and you're able to do that all ahead of time, which really accelerates the implementation curve.
Absolutely. We have a question here from Stefan. Is asking, is it possible to export the captured parts? Absolutely. That's actually the one example that Alex is showing here right now. Like any asset that you've created into Prevu3D, you can export in a wide array of file formats, from USD for Omniverse to like OBJ, FBX, GLB file formats. Like there is a step file. I don't have the list in front of me, but there's a very long, extensive list of file formats we support to export the assets into other systems.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, like you said, like it's all about how we can move data across different systems. There is solutions that are, of course, very CAD engineering related, and there is simulation tools like Omniverse, and you're seeing it where there's not a single tool where you do everything. It's more about this ecosystem and how do you flow information across the different solutions to accelerate your design engineering all the way to your maintenance operation processes in the company.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
This is really great to show because, again, I think that's, when I first met Kinetic Vision, I didn't realize how deep you were getting into the manufacturing process. And that's a really great example you're showing here today for people to appreciate how much you're able to help. And so you have another video here. This is
Yeah.
nice.
And I was mentioning kind of full scale deployments. We have a really great partner that's a publicly, recognized partner in PepsiCo. And we actually presented at GTC in the keynote 2 years ago, and this was actually part of that keynote where we were showcasing, this is one of their AutoStore deployments, and we utilized Omniverse to go ahead and really represent a scanned asset. So we scan this entire facility. We utilize Omniverse to understand, workflows of products, workflow, of people interacting with like the automated routine of the AutoStore. But this was just a really great example of how far you can deploy this beyond just like a single line that I was showing you previously. This is an entire warehouse, and this really gives you the ability to go ahead and understand the bigger picture of how this can be influential. And then we utilize the data that we have presented there with a couple other programs. This is using visual components to go ahead and understand, flow of products, just dependent upon, which robotic system and length of robotic arm that you're utilizing, and then utilizing some of that data also for just flow of people and product relative to, output or export of that good. So there's a number of ways you can utilize Prevu3D as a way to go ahead and really help enable this entire process. It's a major step in our process to get us from the position where you don't have CAD assets. You need to go ahead and scan the facility. You utilize the scanning methodology to go ahead and acquire. You activate it with Prevu3D, and then you do different activities after the fact to go ahead and really help optimize and help enable different ways to optimize. So
It's a great summary, and I think it's an important point because as part of our vision at Prevu3D, it's all about starting with the first single version of the truth, which is the scan itself, right? Because you can't cheat what's on the scan, right? It is what it is. And so starting from there and then be able to take this data, creating the relevant assets, going to different other environments to do your different processes into the workflow, I think is a key fundamental change that we're seeing. And it's pretty exciting for us, like working with Kinetic Vision and a lot of the customers that we work together with, that there's really this understanding that reality can be used in so many ways. And again, if you look at a CAD environment and you see the same into a reality capture based mesh model into Prevu3D, you better understand the context when you see the richness of a reality capture environment like we're seeing here.
Right. I'd actually have a question for the field. If anyone's dabbling in the digital twin space, I'd be interested to know how you're leveraging digital twins, or how you plan to implement digital twins. Asking a question back to the field. So if anybody has a potential use case or example, we'd love to hear it, and love to maybe probe how Prevu3D could be a part of that.
Absolutely. So anybody wants to comment on that, we can definitely exchange about this. Meanwhile, we do have another question from Adam. He's asking, is after scanning the site, do you have better process to optimize, or do you have a 3D team that do it manually to run it to the game engine? Obviously, the scan mesh assets have imperfections from the scanning process, which is not a perfect element. I know that you have some artists, right, working at Kinetic Vision to help you create the models for the CAD area of things.
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's where we'll utilize assets extracted from Prevu3D to go
Mhm.
ahead and leverage those to do some data cleanup. So we have artists. We also have metrology experts. We have a number of packages to help. So on the visualization side, we use like Blender and Maya. On the engineering or metrology side, we have any program from like a Polyworks or Geomagic to like the traditional parametric modeling softwares,
Yeah,
CATIA, Solid Edge, SolidWorks, you name it, and we have it. So it really just depends on what the objective is. Sometimes in some of these real-time physics solvers, and based on the application, you may be able to skip that step where you go directly from raw asset from the scanned
yeah,
environment directly to the real-time or game engine physics model, and you bypass data cleanup. That really does highly depend on the subjectivity of what you're after, and then also data
yeah.
quality coming in. So I think it really just depends on how clear are the surfaces, are there noise, are there missing points? If there are, it may require a little bit of data cleanup.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's for me, I like to describe it as time to results, right? Like it's sometimes you need to go and do some CAD modeling, it's okay. But if you can skip it because you can get the actual scanned assets and use those as a reference and start early on your design process, while let's say some of the CAD work is being done, you're able to parallelize some of these processes and therefore accelerating the overall time to the end results. And I think it's the whole challenge with every company, with every workflow right now is like, how do we accelerate things? We're all struggling to have more better results with less people working on things, and I think that's part of that answer.
That's right. Yep. I agree.
What else? Okay, another question from Adam. Well, you get data from living factory. How do you deal with data protection? Well, I mean, obviously, our system and many other systems that companies like Kinetic Vision use, we are very serious about data protection and security. Like we have all of our uh, certifications like SOC 2 Type 2, GDPR, and so on. So we take great care about the data that our customers have, and this is definitely something that we want to protect. Like a manufacturing site has a lot of intelligence, and of course, we are very careful. And I'm pretty sure that every other company involved in technology does the same thing because you don't want to mess around with IP from your customers. Any other questions? While we're waiting for more questions. So, Alex, what's next for Kinetic Vision? Where do you see your company evolving next? Obviously, you've been embarking pretty solid on the Omniverse bandwagon, which is great. What do you see next happening for your company, and how you're evolving in your services and your engagements?
Yeah, great question. So I think we're really at the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, on how real-time physics, game engine physics, Omniverse, all the above, can be leveraged. So I think it's going to be a great way to go ahead and do anything from potentially augmenting traditional structural analyses. So
Yep.
utilizing that as like complementary to like a standard like ANSYS or Abacus. This allows for really quick directional screening. So a couple of use cases we've had, if let's say you have a DOE matrix that is like, let's say 20 variables by 30 different product types, that may require, months of processing with traditional like structural solvers like an Abacus or ANSYS.
Mhm.
You may be able to go ahead and run, let's say, all 300 different use cases or different parameters all within, let's say, minutes or hours with
Yep.
real-time physics. And this can be a really great way for you to go ahead and understand, the impact of if I do make these different tweaks to these different parameters, how is that going to go ahead and trickle down to the actual end performance of what I'm trying to get after? That then leads you to a complementary need to that traditional solver, where you say, okay, now that I've screened this down to, let's say, my top 5 candidates, let's go ahead and
Yep.
utilize a traditional solver to go ahead and actually understand with trusted physics principles. Let's go ahead and actually understand how this is actually going to go ahead and react within those different physics fundamentals. So that's one way we've found it to be extremely beneficial, is just really expediting that whole process in general. Like I
Yep.
mentioned, we started really in the structural analysis realm. We've been doing it since the 80s, and this is really a game breaker for our industry and for many industries, because many industries are using FEA, whether you know it or not. You are. Um, so that's one way that it's been extremely helpful. Another way it's been extremely helpful is just understanding, just immersively how you can go ahead and utilize different data in feed. So like, different sensor inputs coming off of lines. I know
Yep.
that Prevu3D has the ability to go ahead and visualize IoT data, which really
Mm-hmm.
makes it actionable for, like, production managers to actually see how a line is actually operating, for instance. And they can be across the globe and virtually see, hey, at this line, I'm seeing this type of takt time or cycle time,
Yeah.
and I need to go ahead and do X, Y, Z because I'm seeing these different sensor inputs. Um,
Yeah.
or
And
yeah.
exactly, and what you're talking about, which is extremely important, is there's obviously an interest of visualizing, right, which is an obvious thing, but I think we're entering the realm of understanding, right? You want to understand what's going on, and I think that be able to connect reality, what like the digital twins that you can create with Preview, to be able to connect that with advanced simulations with Omniverse, to be able to connect with your enterprise data, to connect with your live operational telemetry data. It's all about to accelerate the contextual understanding of what's going on. And I think that, I mean, a great example I had recently where a hospital project where they had these special rooms where they had humidity sensors, and without understanding why, the sensors would trigger once in a while with these crazy sensing numbers of humidity, and
Mm,
you'd be like, well, what's going on? And then if you start to look at the time and the path of where those alarms are sounding, well, basically the cleaning lady was hand washing with water the humidity sensors of the various rooms. And so you would have seen actually a path of like, okay, well, these are the triggers that happen over the past hour. And then it becomes obvious, okay, well, clearly someone's triggering in a sequence
right.
those signals, right? And that's again understanding visually, contextually the time and spatial elements of information. If you were looking at those alerts separately, you might spend days and weeks trying to understand why are those sensors triggered, are they broken, and whatever else. And really,
Right.
the answer is like the cleaning lady just did her job, and obviously maybe she needs to clean them differently, but
Yeah.
it's all about the visual context from space and time, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning, but there's been such an industry shift from our vantage, from research and development to production and commercialization. And you had mentioned just trying to eke out as much efficiency out of production as possible.
Hmm.
I think the two really can cohabitate, and I really think that I think Preview 3D really helps enable that. And one
Hmm.
use case that I found, PepsiCo, for instance, and a number of other customers, they'll go ahead and have, like, testing plants, for instance. And if, let's say, somebody wants to go ahead and get into that testing plant and try, let's say, a new
Hmm.
product from the R&D perspective, it takes time on those systems, very valuable
Yep.
time on systems to go ahead and test. It also requires travel to go ahead and get to that site. So if you can actually make a virtual representation of some of those testing facilities, somebody's able to go ahead and ramp up in an accelerated fashion, actually on that virtual twin before they ever get to the physical site. And then once they get to the physical site, they're able to just basically validate, their hypotheses that they've run. And then from that validation, they're able to go ahead and just run wild, and
Yep.
continue on with making that a producible good to commercialization. So that's where I feel like they can actually work really effectively with one another. This
Yep.
really helps make it more effective for R&D to be efficient, to then lead into a commercial product in a quicker period of time. So
Absolutely. It's all about the quickness, the quick iteration. And we've seen the same thing with, design layout projects where if you're able to do a design iteration in minutes instead of days, it completely changed the interaction that you have with different stakeholders. Like it's definitely a game changing, and how you can, share and collaborate with other people. And years ago that would have been like very problematic. And I think that, like you say, the pandemic really helped accelerate some of these topics within the companies. They're realizing that they can't just be standing still. They need to think about how to digitize their environment. And I really like the work that we're doing together. And anybody listening to this, if you want just to embark into this digital twin journey, I mean, like I said before, it starts with just talking to us. Often doing a small pilot project is one of the best ways to really understand what it means, and you go from there. And then a few years later, you have fully functional digital twin in your facility, and you're able to leverage it for so many use cases. Any last questions before we wind down this really good webinar? Anybody? Let me see here. Okay, I think that there's no other question, but anything you want to, last words from you, Alex?
No. I look forward to speaking with any of you guys that are interested. Like Michel mentioned, we're both happy to help. I think 90% of my job is really educating, and I love doing it. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to Michel and myself. We're happy to help. On top of that, we're going to have a few folks at the Automate show that's next week. They're going to be at booth 2090 with one of our partner vendors that's going to be there as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to stop by if you're going to Automate at booth 2090. And then, yeah, I look forward to hopefully speaking with some of you all in the future here. So.
Sounds good. Well, Alex, thank you so much for your time today, and hopefully everybody enjoyed this great conversation. And like I said, definitely contact us. We're more than happy to help you on your digital twin journey. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Michel. Bye-bye.